Welcome to the Bible Made Clear. So we have been walking through John chapter 5 and really focusing in on really what John is focusing in on, and that is the person of Christ. Throughout the gospel, there are different scenarios that John picks from Jesus' life to really focus on who he is in his person and really and in his deity. The deity of Christ is pretty much clear in every chapter of John. As a matter of fact, I've done a previous video going through the Gospel of John and just kind of picking out certain things, and one of those is picking out the verse in every chapter showing the deity of Christ. So with that said, we have moved up through verse 24, and I actually want to just bring up eSword here for a moment. And let's see, in John 5. So we'll have that ready if we need it. But let's move on to the next verses, which I've actually put into the presentation so that we can read along with it easier than looking at eSword. But in these next verses, 25 to 29, the bottom line is Jesus has authority to judge and give life. So as we read through, and again, I've put into red, not like it's Jesus' words are in red like in a particular version of the Bible, but I've put in red. They're all Jesus' words here for the most part, but I'm just focusing on some of the things that we're accentuating to draw out some of the factual information. So Jesus says, "Most assuredly, I say to you," the old King James would be verily, verily. Now, the Latin word for truth is veritas, and oftentimes you'll see it translated in some versions truly, truly, because really what's being expressed in the verily, verily, truly, truly, most assuredly is, this, listen, because this is foundational truth. This is the one you can take to the bank. So he says, "Most assuredly I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself, and has given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man." And the reference there, really important, critical actually, is Daniel chapter 7. Verse 28, "Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice." So previous, the hour is coming, and now is. Now it's the hour is coming, and all who are in the graves, okay, will hear his voice and come forth, right? We're talking about the resurrection from the grave. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, those who have done well to the resurrection of condemnation. Now, before we jump into, looking at the facts, Daniel chapter 7 is very important. As a matter of fact, let's go there in eSword. Daniel chapter 7. And as we go down here, let's see. Verse 21, right here. Daniel says, "I was watching," and Daniel is in the midst of this vision where he's seeing essentially what's going to happen in the future. He has a vision of Christ, the same description really as in Revelation chapter 1. And he's seeing this vision of the Antichrist, the horn that comes out of the other horns. As you see in the previous verse, a mouth which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. So he's going to stand out, and this is what the Antichrist or the beast will do in the book of Revelation. So some of the language here correlates to Revelation 13. You can check that out on your own. But he says, I was watching, and the same horn, and a horn is a reference to like a king or a power, somebody in authority within a government, was making war against the saints and prevailing against them. Again, you go into Revelation 13, the beast prevailed against the saints. So you get this tight correlation actually between the book of Daniel and Revelation, and in this chapter between Daniel 7 and Revelation 13. But I want to get to the, for our focus in John 5. Now, he was prevailing against the saints, verse 22, until the Ancient of Days came, and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. So we're moving from tribulation, where they were persecuted, into the millennial reign. Thus he said, the fourth beast, this is the angel that's revealing this to Daniel, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms. Now this was really what's going to come out of the Roman Empire, and shall devour the whole earth, be a global empire, trample it and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are, so there's no mystery here, 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the ones and shall subdue 3 kings, right? So verse 25, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High. He shall intend to change times and law, and the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times and a half time, 3.5 years, the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, right? But the court shall be seated. They shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole of heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. The people are the people of Israel, the saints of the Most High. The kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey him. Now, where he talks about, in verse 22, it says, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was made in favor of the saints. If we back up, let's see. All right. In verse 13, it says, Daniel says, I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, reference to the second coming. He came to the Ancient of Days, which is a reference to God, right? And they brought him near before him. Now notice the him is capitalized because the translators understand that it's referring to Christ, who is God, before him, who is God. So the Ancient of Days, in a reference to God, is talking about, if you want to make a distinguishing factor in the verses, in a sense where it says he came to the Ancient of Days, in that sense it's Jesus or the Son came to the Father, but the Ancient of Days is just a reference to God. The Son is God, the Holy Spirit's God. So at some points we just need to understand when we were talking about terms or names for God in the Bible, like the name Jehovah, is not just a name for one person of the Trinity. It's really, you're talking about God. Okay, it's a name for God or Yahweh, either one. But then it depends on what particular person of the Trinity is performing a particular act, and that is in relation to us, because they're all in harmony and equal in all ways. So verse 14, he says, then to him was given, again the him is capitalized, talking about Christ, given dominion and glory and a kingdom, and all peoples, nations, and languages should serve, that they all should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away. His kingdom, the one which shall not be destroyed. Now, what's interesting is, if we back up a little further, this is like a mystery novel here. In verse 9, it actually describes God, but the Son, right? So in verse 9, he says, I watched till thrones were put in place. And again, this is in reference to the ruling kingdoms, and then the Antichrist kingdom, the beast that comes out of it. And the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, hair on his head, right, like wool. Throne was a fiery flame. Wheels were burning fire. A fiery stream came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. And I watched then, because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking, the beast, I watched until the beast was slain and his body was given to the burning flame. This is all like compacted what's happening really in Revelation chapter 20, essentially, 13 with the beast, but then into chapter 20 where the millennial reign takes place. And then he says, as for the rest of the beasts, they and their dominion were taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a time and a season. And the interesting point about this is when we get down in verse 13, and he says, notice the term son, he says, and one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. So we're talking about the coming of Christ, right? Christ comes in clouds, right? He ascended into the clouds in Acts 1:11, 9 through 11. He's returning the same way, all right? That's what the angels told them on the day of Pentecost. He's going to come in the same way. And then, Matthew 24, where it talks about, the Son of Man coming in clouds. Again, that's not in chapter 24, that's not a reference to invading armies. That is a reference to the second coming. Because by the time you get to verse 31, which is another side issue in Matthew 24, the gathering together of the elect from four corners of the earth is Israel. It is not the rapture. It is not the Christians. So, because that's the end of the tribulation. And it says after the tribulation, then that's when the Lord is going to come, and he'll be coming in the clouds from heaven, the glory clouds and everything else. So interesting. So the bottom line is, this is Daniel 7, where the reference to the Son of Man is the key to what Jesus is talking about here in verse 27 of John 5. He can execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. He is the one from Daniel 7. It's his kingdom. He's going to set up the kingdom. The books are going to be opened, right? Like, he's the Son of Man. That's why he can judge. I mean, what we need to realize is the Jews that were listening to him talk, they had to know what he was talking about. They knew the scriptures. They knew Daniel. They knew what Daniel talked about. So they realized earlier in John 5, they wanted to stone him because they said, you being a man, make yourself equal with God. They understood what he was saying. They also understood what he was saying later on in John 10. They said, you being a man, you're making yourself God. That's why we're going to stone you. So there was no question that Jesus was claiming equality with the Father. And so here, it's a standout and main issue that John isn't just telling you what Jesus said kind of as a passing phrase. Jesus was specific. He's not just calling himself the Son of Man. He's saying that he has authority to execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. So if we look at some facts, Jesus says he can give spiritual life to those who hear him now, right? So that's verse 25. The hour is coming and now is. So now is. So as he speaks, people believe in him. They have everlasting life. They have spiritual life. That's once the day of Pentecost hit and the church started, the Holy Spirit began his ministry in the church, and he regenerates, brings spiritual life into the one who believes in a unique way. Number two, Jesus claims to be the Son of God. Okay? He says in verse 25, hear the voice of the Son of God. So again, we have a tendency to just kind of read through this stuff, but these things have meaning, right? Because he also, in calling himself the Son of Man, makes the connection between the Son of Man and the Son of God, both being him, right? Jesus can give spiritual life equal to the Father, right? So just like the Father has life in himself because he's God and he has the authority to give that life, he's granted that to the Son, that he can do that for the church, okay? Number four, Jesus is the one that will execute all judgment related to the next life. Now, whether you're a believer in Christ and you're a Christian and you die prior to the rapture, so you will stand before the judgment seat of Christ. All Christians will. That's the word for judgment is bema. The bema seat is the judgment seat for rewards. It's the same word that's used for the Olympic judges in the first century. So when they judge the Olympics, you get gold, silver, bronze. That's the term that's used for judgment seat. It's the bema seat. It's different. The white throne judgment at the end of the 1,000-year reign, those people are all unsaved. The books are opened and they are repaid in the lake of fire according to their works, because hell is brought up before them, before that judgment. So the people in hell, there's no redemption offered to them after this life. Jesus says he is the one who raises people from the grave. So the hour is coming when the graves will hear his voice and they'll come forth. Now, the Jews, and this again ties to Daniel, those who have done good to the resurrection of life, those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. Again, if we look at Esort, if we go back here and go to Daniel 12, hold on, I'm in the way. There we go. All right. So in Daniel 12:1, it says, at that time, this is the end of the tribulation. um, beginning of the millennial reign. Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. Now, again, this is condensing a lot together. Michael, the archangel, casts Satan out of heaven in Revelation 12. That is the midpoint of the tribulation with the abomination of desolation and everything else. Revelation 12 talks about how Israel will be persecuted for the last 3.5 years by Satan. Michael obviously protects them. And then they're obviously eventually delivered. The believers will be granted access to the millennial kingdom, right? Those who are found written in the book. Now, that's the book that's mentioned. There's the book of life of the Lamb, right? In the book of Revelation. So there are different views on the book of life, that everybody's name is entered into it, but as they reject Christ, their name is taken out of it. And then the book of life of the Lamb is those that believe in Christ. So again, the issue is that those that are found written in the book, in God's book, his roll of believers are the ones that are going to be delivered into the millennial reign from the time of when the Great Tribulation lasts 3.5 years, goes through, it ends, and then the millennial reign starts. Now, the beginning of the millennial reign, verse 2, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall arise, some to everlasting life, and to shame and everlasting contempt. So you're going to get everlasting life and then everlasting contempt. So the good and the bad. Now, so Jesus is making this reference here in John 5. Let me move that back. In verse 29. So, but he can raise people from the grave because he's God. Only God can raise people from the dead. People don't have the authority to raise themselves. Number 6, there is a resurrection of the just and the unjust. Now, once they're raised, everybody has to be judged. Okay? Again, whether they're believers or unbelievers, it's one or the other. And number 7, resurrection is a category, not a single, that should be a single even. It should be single event. That's my own typo. More fully revealed by Paul in 1 Corinthians 15. Jesus states the fact of the resurrection. It is not developed. It's not developed here. But Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 gives us more information about the phases of the resurrection, Christ being the first fruits. When Jesus raised up and became the first one with the glorified body, he is the first fruits, with the promise that all those who will be raised in Christ afterwards will also have the same kind of body. Paul mentions that in Philippians 3:21, that we're going to have the same kind of resurrected body as Christ. It'll be a glorified human body, right? Not subject to death anymore. So 1 Corinthians 15, we've talked about that in other videos, but the important thing is that resurrection, in the Old Testament, it was believed to be one general resurrection because, like in Daniel, it's mentioned together, the just and the unjust. Jesus, again, being under the old covenant, helps them understand the same thing, the resurrection of the just and the unjust. The point isn't that he's getting into different phases or events within the resurrection. In other words, the different aspects that will happen over time. You know, the rapture is the church's resurrection, if you will. The beginning of the millennial reign is what Daniel's talking about with the nation of Israel and the Old Testament saints raised up then. So the point being is the emphasis of Jesus isn't what the resurrection's going to be as far as its phases, but that he's the one that has authority over the fact that anybody's going to rise at all, because he's the one that can call them out of the graves to life or to eternal judgment. It's one or the other, but both are going to happen. All right, so moving on, the next aspect, Jesus' will is equal to the Father, and we have both the witness of Jesus and the Father in this. But he also has other witnesses. You have to have two witnesses under the law. So let's just read the couple of verses here. Jesus says, I can of myself do nothing. Now, we talked about last time, and I don't want there to be confusion on this. It doesn't mean that he can't do anything. He's not going to do anything apart from God, or apart from God the Father, because he's God the Son. He is God. So that would be a divergence of wills. Have you ever wondered why Jesus, when he made statements, sometimes it seems like he's only, why didn't he explain more? Or why didn't he get into more discussion on things and everything else? Because he only told the truth. Jesus could never say, I don't know, I think that, because that implies that, well, I could be wrong. Well, he's never wrong. So when he answers a question, he answers the very issue of the question, or he answers what needs to be answered. Sometimes it seems like, well, why didn't he answer that direct question? Because he focuses on the very truth that needs to be addressed regarding the question. So his conversation may be a little bit different, hanging around the campfire, wouldn't be a whole bunch of different stories with him. If it were, they would be like parables explaining some measure of truth, not just wasting time, right? Not just kind of burning the time up for no good reason. He utilized every second he was on this planet to do God's will, to represent the Father, and only say what was necessary to be said. Okay, it's like when he was 12 and they were looking for him because they realized after a few days that they had left him at the temple, and then when they finally they went back and found him, and they said, his parents, were Mary and Joseph. They were like, didn't you know you'd have us worried? Why, what are you doing, right? And he said, well, didn't you know that, I'd be about my Father's business? See, that was the issue. And it's he was focusing on the fact of the issue. The fact of the issue is that he is always going to be doing God the Father's business, always focused on what God the Father is focused on. So them thinking, well, you should have been focused on something else, that was the second priority for him. Now, it didn't mean he was disobedient. He wasn't disobedient. He was actually the perfect kid, right? He never sinned. He never did anything wrong. He was under the authority of his parents till he wasn't, till he went out in ministry and all that. So just interesting, some of the things that we kind of read by, but we don't really focus on. Anyways, I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous. Now, when he says I hear, I judge, Jesus knows what he's hearing and what he's seeing. So when he sees God the Father doing a work, like earlier in the chapter, he knows God the Father is doing a work. He works, right? He says, my Father works till now, and I work. Now, he saw the Father working in this guy's life that he healed, the man that was lame for 38 years. So then, being perfectly aligned with the Father, he worked to accomplish what the Father was doing, which was to heal the man. Okay, and then it's the same thing. He hears, he judges, just like the Father, right? Why? And his judgment's righteous. Why? He says, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. He sent me. I'm doing, all of his bidding. I am in perfect alignment. Like, if you were to ask the question, what is God really expecting, like, of man? Well, the ideal answer is Jesus Christ. So Jesus is the perfect answer to what man should be. Now, we can't be that because we're already sinners. We can be that in him, because in him I receive the righteousness of Christ because he takes my sin. In him I can have victory over death. In him I can have victory over sin. In him, right, I am forgiven. In him I have an inheritance in the future. In him, in him, in him. It's all in him. Nothing is outside of him. It's only because of him, and it's only in him. So in saying that, we need to understand that Jesus, being the perfect man and then doing what he did to redeem us and conquer death and all that for the resurrection, he accomplished the Father's will and was never out of alignment with the Father, because the Father sent him to do it. Like, this is like perfect harmony, right? Now he says, if I bear witness of myself, what my witness is not true, right? And it's not because he couldn't be trusted or anything, because, later on in the gospel, he says that, if I bear witness of myself in John 8, he says, my witness is true, because he says, look, I know where I came from. I know where I'm going. Like, I know things that you guys don't know. But he accommodated and lived under the law, obeyed it perfectly, because we never could. He did that for us too, which the perfect human being would do. But under the law, two witnesses are required. It's by the mouth of two or three witnesses, everything is established. So that's why he says, my witness is not true in relation to the law that all the Jews were under, so that they could understand that he was accommodating the truth of the law that he was under, and then also what they understood to validate that something is true. Okay? He said, there is another who bears witness of me, and I know that the witness which he witnesses of me is true. The capitals are there to show that he's obviously talking about the Father. So what are the facts? Jesus cannot act independent of God the Father. He's God the Son. He is God, right? Like we've mentioned a number of times here. Acting independent of the Father is not a physical, but it is a moral impossibility. It's not that he physically couldn't do it. He couldn't do it morally. He would be breaking with the will of the Father. The morality of Christ being perfect, it was of necessity. He couldn't just act alone. I think that's really important. As a matter of fact, that particular distinction I got out of the Believer's Bible Commentary. Number 3, since Jesus' will is that of the Father, he can manifest God the Father. So, Jesus said that, he came to manifest the Father. Well, even at the Last Supper, right? Philip said, well, just show us the Father and it'll be sufficient. He said, Philip, have I been so long with you? Like, it's been over 3 years, Philip. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Now, he's not saying, I'm the Father, but if you were watching me, and then he goes on to talk about, the works that he did and the things that he says to believe. But if you were watching me, what I was doing is what the Father was doing, because I was doing what he wanted done. Like, in this instance, I saw the Father healing this man. I healed the man. I told him to get up, right? So take up his bed and walk. So there's a relationship aspect between the Father and the Son that we cannot see, right? That Jesus is dealing with, and he is manifesting the Father. So, if you want to know what the Father is like, you just look at Jesus. So you say, okay, well, what do you think God gets mad at? What did Jesus get mad at? What does God love? What does Jesus love? What, brings joy to God? Well, what brought joy to Jesus, right? So as you look at him, as you listen to him, as he answers questions, as he deals with particular situations in the Gospels, that is the manifestation of God the Father. The only time the Son is really manifested is on the cross, right? So just some interesting things here. He says, number 4, man can choose to act independent of God's will, which is an interesting fact because of the sin nature. The Son cannot by nature, right? A moral impossibility. So here's what's interesting. I can choose to act independent of God's will. Well, Adam did, and ever since then, everybody else does too. But once I do that, I break with God morally. I become a sinner because I'm exercising my own will differently than his will. And isn't it interesting? I can make a choice that Jesus can't. I can make a choice to lie. Jesus can't. He only tells the truth. He is the truth. He said, I'm the way, right, to God, to salvation. The truth, right? He didn't just speak it. He lived it. He exampled it, everything in relation to the truth. And the life. Life only comes through him. Physical life, only because he created us. Spiritual life, only because he provides it to us when we believe. Number 5, the Son's judgments are not influenced by bias, prejudice, opinion, or contrary want. Only man's judgments are. So notice he says, as I hear, I judge, my judgment is righteous. He always judges righteously because it's not influenced by anything other than what the absolute truth is, what absolute reality is. He's not deterred by anything. He's not reactive. He's not capricious or anything like that. We're influenced by our bias, our prejudices, our opinions. God may want something. I say, well, I want this though. We have a contrary want, which is contrary will, right? I exercise my will against God every time I do something that God would not want me to do, think, an attitude, any of that. All that's sinful. So, which is why we need Christ. Number 6, Jesus' statement, and this will be the last one we deal with here, and then we'll pick up on it next time. Jesus' statement about himself alone was not inaccurate with the law. Under Moses' law, there is a requirement for 2 witnesses for establishing the truth of a claim, Deuteronomy 17:6 and 19:15. In particular, 19:15, if you look those up, Jesus had the second witness of God the Father. Now, next time, we will jump into the witnesses that Jesus gives regarding his person, work, and coming. Again, crucial. So those are only significant after he establishes basically the fact that his will is equal to God the Father, and both him and the Father are a witness to who he is, right? So anyways, hopefully again this is kind of opening up some of John 5. I called this little series John 5 the cult killer, because every cult, Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, Christian Science, Oneness, Pentecostal, and then other religions of the world, everything from Islam, Hinduism, Scientology, any of the Eastern religions, the New Age movement, they all want to give Jesus some minor credibility so that they can patronize him and kind of put him off to the side, like, pat him on the head and say, yeah, no, you're a good guy, but we got these other gurus and we got these other heroes and everything else. But remember, not only does the Bible disagree with that clearly, okay, but none of these other groups ever had the anticipation of any of their leaders coming. Only Christ from the Garden of Eden, right? And this is the paths issue, right? The paths method, predictive prophecy. None of them were anticipated. None of them were validated. When they came, they didn't do any kind of work to validate themselves. What's amazing to me is that so many Muslims will follow, the teachings of Islam and Muhammad. Yet Muhammad's, when he was asked, do you do miracles? He says, I don't do miracles. He gave nothing for validation, zero. He was never anticipated. There was no prophecy. Wow, we're waiting for Muhammad to come, right? Nothing. He just kind of created Islam. He made it, right? Took one of the Canaanite gods and said, this is the one we're going to follow. And then there's no confirmation. In other words, because there's no anticipation of their arrival, there can't be any confirmation that this is the one that was discussed. This is the one that was predicted. See, here's the confirmation that they're the predicted one. And oh, by the way, while they were here, they were validated by these powers and miracles that they worked. Nobody. That doesn't... Jesus Christ is the only one in human history. It's amazing to me. But anyways, with that, I'll leave you and we'll pick up on it next week. So until then, may God richly bless you as you continue to study his word.